Dr. Elena Rodriguez discovered her husband's betrayal at 3:47 a.m. while reviewing meteorological data in her home office. The notification email from the Patent and Trademark Office should have been routine, but the subject line made her blood freeze. Patent Transfer Confirmation, Atmospheric Pressure Prediction Algorithm Series. She hadn't authorized any patent transfers. The documents showed her family's five-generation legacy of weather prediction innovations had been sold to Pinnacle Weather Systems for $2.3 million. The buyer was listed as Marcus Rodriguez, her husband of 12 years. The same Marcus who had been kissing her goodnight while secretly liquidating her life's work. By sunrise, Elena had vanished from her life as a respected atmospheric physicist, but she'd left behind something far more dangerous than a missing person case. She'd left behind a woman who understood exactly how storms were created and was about to unleash one that would destroy everyone who had betrayed her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena Rodriguez had always believed that weather patterns were predictable if you understood the variables. Standing in her kitchen at dawn, staring at patent documents that proved her husband had systematically stolen her family's intellectual property, she realized that human betrayal followed patterns too. The coffee maker gurgled to life automatically, the same sound that had started every morning of their marriage, but everything else had fundamentally changed. Marcus lay sleeping upstairs, probably dreaming of the $2.3 million he'd received for selling patents that had taken 5 generations of the Rodriguez family to develop. He had no idea that his wife had spent the night discovering the full scope of his deception, or that she was already 3 moves ahead in a game he didn't know they were playing. The patents he'd sold represented more than just intellectual property. They were the culmination of 150 years of Rodriguez family innovation in meteorological science. Elena's great-great-grandfather had been a ship captain who developed early storm prediction methods that saved hundreds of lives during the hurricane seasons of the 1870s. Each generation had built upon that foundation, creating increasingly sophisticated algorithms and measurement techniques that could predict atmospheric changes with unprecedented accuracy. Elena herself had spent 15 years perfecting the latest iterations, combining traditional meteorological knowledge with cutting-edge artificial intelligence to create prediction systems that outperformed anything the National Weather Service currently used. The irony was devastating. 3 months ago, Elena had been approached by the National Weather Service about licensing her atmospheric pressure prediction algorithms for their new nationwide early warning system. The contract negotiations had been proceeding smoothly, with preliminary estimates suggesting a licensing deal worth $50 million over 10 years. Marcus had been supportive, encouraging her to pursue the opportunity while handling the business aspects of the negotiations. Now she understood why. He'd needed access to her research and patent information to facilitate his theft. Elena's discovery had begun innocently enough. She'd been working late in her home office, analyzing pressure data from the monitoring stations she'd installed across Colorado's Front Range. Her research focused on microclimate prediction, particularly the sudden atmospheric shifts that could spawn tornadoes in the Denver metropolitan area. The work was funded by a NOAA grant and represented a potential breakthrough in short-term severe weather forecasting. She'd been so absorbed in her analysis that she'd nearly missed the email notification that changed everything. Patent transfer confirmations were supposed to be routine administrative messages. Elena received them regularly when she licensed her work to universities or research institutions. But this notification came at an odd hour from an automated system she didn't recognize. When she'd opened the email, expecting to find a routine filing confirmation, she'd instead discovered that 5 of her most valuable patents had been transferred to Pinnacle Weather Systems, a company she'd never heard of. The transfer documents bore electronic signatures that appeared to be hers, but which she'd never created. The initial shock had given way to methodical investigation. Elena's scientific training had taught her to approach problems systematically, gathering data before drawing conclusions. She'd spent the remaining hours until dawn accessing patent databases, corporate registration records, and financial documents that painted a picture of betrayal so comprehensive it took her breath away. Marcus hadn't just stolen her current patents. He'd been systematically documenting and preparing to claim ownership of research she hadn't even completed yet. Pinnacle Weather Systems, she'd discovered, was a shell corporation registered in Delaware 3 months earlier. The corporate filings listed Marcus as the sole owner and CEO, with business addresses at a post office box in Wilmington. The company's stated purpose was meteorological research and technology development, but it had no employees, no research facilities, and no operational infrastructure beyond the stolen patents. It existed solely as a vehicle for Marcus to monetize her family's intellectual property while avoiding the legal complications of selling the patents directly under his own name. The deeper Elena dug, the more systematic the betrayal became. Bank records, which she could access through their joint accounts, showed that Marcus had received the $2.3 million payment 2 weeks earlier. Rather than depositing the money into their shared accounts, he'd opened new accounts at a different bank under Pinnacle's corporate name. The money had been immediately transferred to investment accounts and offshore holdings that Elena couldn't trace without additional information. Marcus hadn't just stolen her patents, he'd created an entire parallel financial infrastructure to hide and protect the proceeds. Elena's scientific mind processed the implications with cold clarity. The timing of the patent theft coincided perfectly with the National Weather Service negotiations. Marcus had stolen her intellectual property precisely when it was about to become most valuable, ensuring that he would capture the maximum benefit from her life's work. The $2.3 million he'd received from the initial sale was just the beginning. If Pinnacle Weather Systems succeeded in securing the National Weather Service contract using her stolen patents, the long-term revenue could exceed $100 million. The personal betrayal cut deeper than the financial theft. Elena and Marcus had met during graduate school at Colorado State University, where they'd both been studying atmospheric science. Marcus had been brilliant in his coursework, but had struggled with original research, while Elena had shown an intuitive understanding of weather patterns that impressed even her professors. Their relationship had seemed natural, built on shared interests and complementary skills. Marcus had provided emotional support and business acumen, while Elena focused on the technical research that drove their joint success. After marriage, they'd established what Elena had believed was a true partnership. She handled the scientific research and development, while Marcus managed patent filings, contract negotiations, and business development. The arrangement had seemed ideal, allowing Elena to focus on her strengths while ensuring that their intellectual property was properly protected and monetized. Marcus had been meticulous about documentation, always insisting on detailed records of Elena's research process, comprehensive patent applications, and thorough documentation of every innovation. She'd thought his attention to detail reflected professional competence and care for protecting their shared interests. Now she realized he'd been systematically documenting her work to facilitate its theft. The betrayal extended beyond the immediate patent theft. Elena's review of their communication history revealed that Marcus had been feeding information about her research to unknown third parties for months. Email records showed coded conversations about development timelines and intellectual property assessments that had nothing to do with their legitimate business activities. Phone records revealed frequent calls to numbers Elena didn't recognize, including several international calls to countries known for intellectual property laundering. Marcus had been running a sophisticated operation to steal and monetize her work while maintaining the facade of a supportive husband. Elena's initial impulse was to confront Marcus immediately, to demand explanations and force him to reverse the patent transfers before more damage could be done. But her scientific training overrode emotional reactions. She recognized that direct confrontation would only alert Marcus to her discovery and give him opportunities to hide evidence, transfer additional assets, or otherwise protect himself from consequences. Instead, she decided to treat the situation like a research project, gathering comprehensive data before taking any action that might compromise her ultimate objectives. The first priority was protecting her remaining intellectual property. Elena maintained research notes, prototype designs, and experimental data that weren't covered by the stolen patents, but represented years of additional work. This information was stored on secure servers at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, where Elena held an adjunct research position, but Marcus also had access to backup copies on their home network. She spent the early morning hours creating encrypted copies of all her research materials and transferring them to secure storage systems that Marcus couldn't access. If he was planning to steal additional intellectual property, she would make sure he couldn't access the raw materials needed for future thefts.
The second priority was understanding the full scope of Marcus's deception. Elena's scientific background included expertise in data analysis and pattern recognition, skills that proved invaluable for investigating financial fraud.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She began systematically reviewing bank statements, credit card records, investment accounts, and business documents, looking for patterns that might reveal additional hidden activities. What she found exceeded her worst expectations. Marcus hadn't just stolen her patents, he'd been systematically embezzling from their joint research projects for over 2 years. Grant money from NOAA, the National Science Foundation, and the Department of Energy had been diverted to accounts Elena couldn't access. Equipment purchases that she'd thought were for their shared research had actually been charged to her grants, while the equipment was delivered to locations Elena had never seen. Consulting fees that Marcus claimed to have earned through legitimate business activities were actually payments from companies that were licensing Elena's intellectual property without her knowledge. The pattern of theft was so comprehensive and sophisticated that Elena realized Marcus must have been planning this betrayal for years, possibly since the beginning of their marriage. The revelation forced Elena to reconsider everything she thought she knew about their relationship. Had Marcus ever genuinely loved her, or had she simply been a target from the beginning? His graduate school struggles with original research took on new significance when viewed alongside his current theft of her innovations. Perhaps Marcus had recognized early in their relationship that Elena possessed the creative abilities he lacked and had deliberately cultivated their partnership as a means of accessing and eventually claiming her work. The possibility that their entire marriage had been a long-term fraud operation was almost too painful to contemplate, but Elena's scientific objectivity demanded that she consider all potential explanations for the evidence. The emotional impact of these discoveries was devastating, but Elena found strength in transforming her pain into analytical focus. She'd always been most comfortable when working with data, finding patterns, and solving complex problems. Marcus's betrayal was simply another complex system to understand and ultimately defeat. Elena's expertise in meteorological prediction, it turned out, translated surprisingly well to predicting human behavior. Both required understanding underlying forces, recognizing early warning signs, and preparing for various possible outcomes. By the time Marcus woke up, Elena had already begun disappearing from their shared life. She'd transferred essential research materials to secure locations, documented the evidence of his theft, and started developing a comprehensive strategy for exposing his crimes while protecting herself from further harm. She prepared coffee and breakfast as she had every morning for 12 years, but everything about their relationship had fundamentally changed. Marcus had no idea that his carefully planned theft had been discovered, or that his victim had already begun planning his destruction. Elena spent that morning maintaining perfect normalcy while internally preparing for war. She discussed Marcus's plans for the day, inquired about his work schedule, and even mentioned looking forward to their dinner plans that evening. Marcus showed no signs of guilt or anxiety, chatting easily about mundane topics while the evidence of his massive fraud sat in Elena's laptop bag just feet away. His comfort with the deception was perhaps the most chilling aspect of the entire situation. This wasn't a desperate act born of temporary financial pressure. It was the calculated behavior of someone who had systematically planned and executed a complex theft while maintaining an elaborate emotional facade. The decision to disappear rather than immediately confront Marcus was strategic rather than emotional. Elena recognized that her husband had committed federal crimes, including patent fraud, grant embezzlement, and identity theft. But she also understood that Marcus had spent years preparing for this theft and had likely developed contingency plans for various scenarios, including the possibility of discovery. If she confronted him directly, he could claim the patent transfers were legitimate, destroy evidence of the embezzlement, or use their joint assets to fund expensive legal defenses that could tie up the case for years. Elena needed time to gather irrefutable evidence and build relationships with law enforcement officials who could pursue federal charges. Elena's scientific background provided unique advantages for investigating complex fraud.
Her experience analyzing atmospheric data had taught her to recognize subtle patterns and anomalies that might escape notice from less technical observers. She applied these same analytical skills to examining Marcus's financial activities, communication patterns, and business relationships. What emerged was a detailed picture of criminal activity that went far beyond the initial patent theft. Marcus had been operating what amounted to an intellectual property laundering scheme, stealing research from multiple sources and selling it through various shell corporations. The sophistication of Marcus's operation was actually encouraging from Elena's perspective. The more complex and extensive his crimes, the more evidence he would have created, and the more people he would have involved. Complex criminal enterprises inevitably left extensive paper trails and created opportunities for investigation and prosecution. Elena's task was to find and document that evidence before Marcus realized he'd been discovered and had opportunities to destroy it or disappear with his stolen assets. Elena's disappearance began with a carefully planned deception. She told Marcus she needed to travel to Boulder for a series of meetings with NOAA officials about the pending National Weather Service contract. The story was plausible because Elena frequently traveled for business, and Marcus had been encouraging her to prioritize the contract negotiations.
She packed for a 3-day trip, taking only essential items and leaving behind anything that might suggest she wasn't planning to return. Her laptop bag contained terabytes of evidence that Marcus didn't know she'd gathered, along with research materials that represented her life's work. The drive to Denver International Airport was surreal. Elena had made this journey hundreds of times over the years, usually excited about research opportunities or professional conferences. This time, she was fleeing from her own life while carrying evidence of crimes that could send her husband to federal prison. She felt like an actress playing a role in someone else's story, going through the motions of normal behavior while everything familiar and comfortable crumbled around her. But beneath the emotional turmoil, Elena felt something else, a cold, analytical clarity that reminded her of the focus she experienced during severe weather events, when split-second decisions could mean the difference between accurate predictions and catastrophic failures. Elena didn't board the flight to Washington, D.C. that she'd told Marcus she was taking. Instead, she rented a car using a credit card account Marcus didn't know about and drove to Colorado Springs, where she checked into a modest hotel under her maiden name. The city was far enough from Denver to avoid accidental discovery, but close enough to allow rapid access to resources she might need. Elena had chosen Colorado Springs because it was home to several federal agencies and research institutions where she had professional contacts who might prove useful in building her case against Marcus. The first 48 hours in Colorado Springs were devoted to comprehensive evidence analysis and strategic planning. Elena spread printouts of financial records, patent documents, and email communications across the hotel room's desk and adjoining table, creating a timeline that mapped Marcus's criminal activities across several years. The scope of his deception was staggering. He'd been stealing not just from Elena, but from multiple research institutions, federal agencies, and private companies. The stolen intellectual property included weather prediction algorithms, atmospheric monitoring techniques, and climate modeling systems that represented millions of dollars in research and development investments. Elena's scientific background proved invaluable for understanding the technical aspects of Marcus's crimes. She could analyze the stolen patent applications and identify precisely which elements represented original Rodriguez family innovations versus legitimate prior art. This technical analysis would be crucial for federal prosecutors attempting to prove that Marcus had stolen specific intellectual property rather than simply developing similar technologies through independent research. Elena's detailed knowledge of her family's meteorological innovations provided a level of technical expertise that would be impossible for Marcus to challenge or dispute. The financial evidence was equally damning. Elena's analysis revealed a pattern of systematic embezzlement that dated back to the early years of their marriage. Marcus had been skimming money from research grants, inflating equipment costs, and billing personal expenses to federal projects. The total amount of stolen funds exceeded $800,000, not including the $2.3 million from the patent sales.
Elena realized that their comfortable lifestyle, which she'd attributed to Marcus's business acumen and their shared success, had actually been funded largely by his theft of government money and intellectual property belonging to other researchers. Elena's investigation also revealed the broader network of people and organizations involved in Marcus's crimes. The patent sales had been facilitated by a patent attorney named Jonathan Blake, who specialized in intellectual property transfers for technology companies. Elena's research into Blake's background revealed a pattern of questionable transactions involving disputed patents and clients with unclear ownership claims. Blake had been instrumental in creating the shell corporations that Marcus used to hide his stolen assets, and had likely known that the patents being sold weren't legitimately owned by Marcus. Pinnacle Weather Systems was just one of several companies Marcus had created to launder stolen intellectual property. Elena found evidence of at least 4 additional shell corporations, each designed to handle different aspects of Marcus's criminal enterprise. Storm Dynamics LLC had been created to handle consulting contracts with federal agencies. Atmospheric Solutions Inc. was being used to bid on government research contracts using stolen technology. Climate Data Systems was marketing Elena's proprietary algorithms to private weather services. The network of companies was sophisticated enough to obscure the connections between various criminal activities while maximizing the revenue generated from each stolen innovation. Elena's scientific training had taught her the importance of peer review and independent verification. She recognized that her analysis of Marcus's crimes, while thorough and methodical, might be compromised by emotional bias or technical blind spots. She needed independent experts to verify her conclusions and provide credible testimony about the significance of the stolen intellectual property. Elena began reaching out to colleagues in the atmospheric science community, carefully probing for information about Marcus's recent activities without revealing that she'd discovered his crimes.
The responses were illuminating and disturbing. Several colleagues reported that Marcus had approached them with questions about their research methods, patent applications, and commercial licensing arrangements. Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the National Center for Atmospheric Research mentioned that Marcus had been unusually interested in her tornado prediction algorithms and had asked detailed questions about patent protection strategies. Dr. Robert Chen from NOAA reported similar inquiries about hurricane tracking technologies. Elena realized that Marcus had been systematically surveying the intellectual property landscape in atmospheric science, identifying valuable technologies that might be vulnerable to theft. Elena's colleagues also provided crucial information about recent developments in Federal Weather Service contracting. The National Weather Service's Modernization Initiative represented the largest investment in meteorological technology in decades, with contracts worth over $500 million available for atmospheric prediction systems, monitoring equipment, and data analysis platforms. Marcus's theft of Elena's patents was timed to coincide with the peak demand for exactly the types of technologies he'd stolen. If his shell corporations succeeded in winning federal contracts using Elena's innovations, the long-term revenue could exceed $200 million. The systematic nature of Marcus's planning was both impressive and terrifying. He'd spent years positioning himself to capitalize on federal spending in atmospheric science while simultaneously stealing the intellectual property needed to compete for those contracts. Elena's patents represented just one component of a larger criminal enterprise designed to dominate the market for weather prediction technology through theft rather than innovation. The scope of his ambition was matched only by the comprehensiveness of his deception. Elena's analysis also revealed timeline pressures that worked in her favor. The National Weather Service contract proposals were due in 6 weeks, which meant Marcus would need to finalize his bid preparations soon. The stolen patents he'd acquired from Elena were crucial components of his proposed systems, but they required integration with other technologies and validation through field testing. Marcus would need to access Elena's research notes, experimental data, and prototype systems to create a compelling proposal. His inability to contact Elena would create increasing pressure as the deadline approached. Elena's strategic planning focused on leveraging these timeline pressures to force Marcus into making mistakes that would provide additional evidence of his crimes. She began implementing a carefully orchestrated campaign of indirect pressure designed to make Marcus increasingly desperate while documenting his responses.
The key was to make Marcus believe that external forces were threatening his plans while avoiding any direct contact that might alert him to Elena's knowledge of his crimes. The first phase involved disrupting Marcus's access to Elena's research materials. Elena had secured her most sensitive data, but Marcus still had access to backup systems and shared files that contained valuable information. Elena remotely accessed their shared network systems and began systematically corrupting or deleting files that Marcus would need for his contract proposals. She made the disruptions appear random or technical rather than deliberate, creating the impression that system failures rather than sabotage were threatening his timeline. Elena also began feeding false information into the atmospheric science community about technical problems with the types of prediction algorithms Marcus had stolen. She reached out to colleagues and professional contacts, mentioning concerns about stability issues, calibration problems, and validation challenges that might affect similar technologies. The goal was to create industry buzz about potential problems that might make federal contracting officials hesitant to accept proposals based on Elena's stolen algorithms without extensive additional testing and verification. The second phase involved more direct interference with Marcus's criminal network. Elena had identified the key individuals and organizations that were facilitating Marcus's crimes, including the patent attorney, shell corporation officers, and technology companies that were licensing stolen innovations. Elena began providing anonymous tips to relevant authorities about potential intellectual property violations, tax fraud, and regulatory compliance problems that might trigger investigations into Marcus's business activities. Elena's approach to whistleblowing was methodical and strategic. Rather than making dramatic accusations that might be dismissed as the claims of a disgruntled spouse, she provided specific, verifiable information about technical violations that would require official investigation. Patent and trademark violations, federal grant compliance issues, and corporate registration irregularities were all matters that government agencies were required to investigate, regardless of the source of the complaints. Elena's scientific background allowed her to identify precise technical violations that would be impossible for Marcus to explain away or dismiss. The third phase involved building a coalition of allies who could provide support, expertise, and credibility for Elena's ultimate confrontation with Marcus. Elena's professional reputation in the atmospheric science community provided access to colleagues who had their own reasons for opposing intellectual property theft and research fraud. She began carefully sharing information about Marcus's crimes with trusted colleagues, building a network of expert witnesses who could testify about the significance of the stolen technologies and the damage caused by Marcus's deceptions. Dr. Patricia Williams, Elena's former graduate advisor and current director of atmospheric research at Colorado State University, proved to be particularly valuable. Dr.
Williams had worked with the Rodriguez family's meteorological innovations for decades and could provide authoritative testimony about their historical significance and technical sophistication. She also had extensive connections within federal agencies and could facilitate introductions to law enforcement officials who specialized in intellectual property crimes. Elena also reached out to Maria Santos, a forensic accountant who specialized in grant fraud and research embezzlement cases. Maria's expertise in following complex financial transactions would be crucial for documenting Marcus's theft of federal funds and his use of shell corporations to hide stolen assets. Maria had worked on several high-profile cases involving research fraud and understood both the legal requirements for building federal cases and the investigative techniques needed to trace money through sophisticated laundering schemes. The coalition-building process revealed that Marcus's crimes had affected far more people than Elena had initially realized. Other researchers reported suspicious approaches from Marcus about their work, unusual questions about their patent protection strategies, and concerns about unauthorized use of their innovations by unknown companies. Elena realized that she was not Marcus's only victim, but rather one target in a systematic intellectual property theft that had been operating for years. Elena's investigation also uncovered evidence that Marcus had been working with international partners to sell stolen American research to foreign governments and corporations. Email communications and financial records suggested that several of Elena's algorithms had been transferred to Chinese and Russian weather services, potentially compromising American meteorological capabilities and national security interests. The international dimension of Marcus's crimes elevated the case from simple patent fraud to potential espionage and export control violations.
As Elena gathered evidence and built her coalition of allies, she maintained careful surveillance of Marcus's activities through mutual friends, professional contacts, and social media monitoring. Marcus appeared to be maintaining his normal routine while growing increasingly frustrated by his inability to contact Elena. He'd left numerous voicemails expressing concern about her extended absence and requesting information about her return timeline. The voicemails provided useful evidence of Marcus's state of mind and his growing anxiety about the National Weather Service contract deadline. Elena's extended disappearance was also creating professional complications for Marcus. Several colleagues and business associates were asking about Elena's availability for meetings, conference presentations, and collaborative projects. Marcus was being forced to make excuses for Elena's absence while maintaining the fiction that their marriage was normal and that Elena was simply engaged in routine business travel. The social pressure was clearly affecting Marcus's comfort and confidence, creating the kind of stress that often led criminals to make careless mistakes. 3 weeks after Elena's disappearance, Marcus made his first major error. Desperate to access Elena's research notes for the National Weather Service proposal, he attempted to break into her secure research accounts at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. The intrusion was detected immediately by the center's cybersecurity systems, and Marcus's access attempts were logged and reported to federal authorities as potential research security violations. The incident provided concrete evidence of Marcus's intent to steal additional intellectual property and established a clear timeline showing his escalating criminal behavior. Elena learned about Marcus's cybersecurity breach through her contacts at the research center. The incident confirmed that her strategy of applying timeline pressure was working and that Marcus was becoming increasingly desperate and reckless. More importantly, the cybersecurity violation provided federal authorities with jurisdiction to investigate Marcus's activities and potentially uncover his broader pattern of crimes. Elena realized that the time had come to surface with her evidence and formally cooperate with federal investigators. Elena's reappearance was carefully orchestrated to maximize the impact on Marcus while ensuring her own safety and the preservation of evidence. Rather than returning home or contacting Marcus directly, Elena first reached out to FBI Special Agent Lisa Kamar, who specialized in intellectual property crimes and had worked on several high-profile cases involving research fraud. Elena's initial contact was through Dr. Williams, who had existing relationships with federal law enforcement through her work on classified atmospheric research projects. The meeting with Agent Kumar took place at the FBI's Denver field office, where Elena presented the comprehensive evidence she'd gathered over 3 weeks of investigation. Kumar was immediately impressed by the thoroughness of Elena's documentation and the sophistication of Marcus's criminal enterprise. The case represented exactly the type of systematic intellectual property theft that federal authorities were increasingly concerned about, particularly when it involved technologies with national security implications. Agent Kumar's initial assessment confirmed Elena's analysis of Marcus's crimes and validated her strategic approach to evidence gathering. The combination of patent fraud, grant embezzlement, cybersecurity violations, and potential export control violations provided multiple avenues for federal prosecution. The international dimensions of Marcus's activities made the case a priority for federal authorities who were concerned about the systematic theft of American research and technology by foreign governments. Elena's cooperation with federal investigators marked the beginning of a coordinated law enforcement operation that would ultimately expose the full scope of Marcus's criminal network. But Elena's role was far from passive. Her scientific expertise, detailed knowledge of Marcus's methods, and strategic thinking would prove crucial for building the comprehensive case needed to ensure that Marcus and his co-conspirators faced appropriate consequences for their crimes. Elena had transformed from victim to expert witness, and she was prepared to use every resource at her disposal to ensure that justice was served. The federal investigation moved with surprising speed once Elena provided her evidence and agreed to cooperate. Agent Kumar assembled a task force that included specialists in intellectual property crimes, financial fraud, cybersecurity violations, and export control enforcement.
Elena's documentation provided the roadmap for a comprehensive investigation that quickly expanded beyond Marcus's individual crimes to encompass the broader network of people and organizations that had facilitated his theft of intellectual property. Elena's role in the investigation was unprecedented. Rather than simply being a victim and witness, she became an active consultant, helping federal agents understand the technical aspects of atmospheric science, the value of stolen innovations, and the methods Marcus had used to monetize his crimes. Elena's scientific background allowed her to explain complex meteorological concepts to law enforcement officials and prosecutors, ensuring that they understood both the significance of the stolen technologies and the sophistication required to develop them. The investigation's first major breakthrough came when federal agents executed search warrants on Marcus's business offices, storage facilities, and computer systems. The evidence recovered exceeded even Elena's comprehensive analysis. Marcus had maintained detailed records of his criminal activities, apparently confident that his shell corporation structure and international partnerships would protect him from discovery. The seized documents revealed the full scope of his intellectual property theft, including technologies stolen from dozens of researchers and institutions across multiple years. Elena found grim satisfaction in learning that Marcus's meticulous documentation, which she'd once admired as professional competence, had created a comprehensive record of his crimes that would make federal prosecution straightforward. His emails, financial records, and business documents provided irrefutable evidence of systematic theft, fraud, and deception. Marcus's attention to detail, turned against him, would ensure that he faced severe consequences for every aspect of his criminal enterprise. The investigation also revealed that Marcus's crimes were part of a broader pattern of intellectual property theft targeting American atmospheric science research. Federal authorities identified at least 12 other cases where researchers' work had been stolen and sold to foreign governments or competitors. Elena's case became the cornerstone of a much larger federal prosecution targeting what authorities described as a systematic campaign to undermine American meteorological capabilities and steal taxpayer-funded research for commercial exploitation. Elena's expertise proved crucial for helping federal prosecutors understand the national security implications of Marcus's crimes. The atmospheric prediction technologies he'd stolen weren't just valuable for commercial weather services. They were essential components of military weather forecasting, disaster preparedness, and climate change monitoring systems. Marcus's sale of these technologies to foreign governments had potentially compromised American national security while enriching himself through the theft of taxpayer-funded research. The federal investigation's expansion created new opportunities for Elena to recover damages and ensure that Marcus faced comprehensive consequences for his crimes. The involvement of national security agencies brought additional resources and legal authorities that wouldn't have been available in a simple intellectual property case. Elena realized that Marcus's greed and ambition had led him to commit crimes that warranted the most serious federal penalties, including potential charges under espionage statutes. Elena's transformation during this period was remarkable. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal through routine patent notifications had become a crucial federal witness whose expertise was shaping a major national security investigation. Elena's scientific training had prepared her for systematic analysis and methodical problem-solving, but she'd never imagined applying those skills to exposing criminal enterprises and testifying in federal court. The experience was simultaneously terrifying and empowering, giving Elena a sense of the purpose and control that had been missing during the dark weeks immediately following her discovery of Marcus's crimes. The personal cost of Elena's cooperation with federal authorities was significant. Her marriage was obviously over, her professional life had been disrupted by months of investigation and testimony preparation, and her financial security had been compromised by Marcus's theft of their joint assets. But Elena also recognized that she'd gained something valuable through the experience: a clear understanding of her own strength and capabilities when faced with seemingly impossible challenges. Elena's case became a model for how victims of intellectual property theft could work effectively with federal authorities to expose complex criminal enterprises. Her systematic approach to evidence gathering, her technical expertise, and her strategic thinking had been crucial for building the comprehensive case needed to prosecute not just Marcus, but the entire network of people who had facilitated his crimes.
Federal authorities began consulting with Elena about other cases involving research fraud and intellectual property theft, recognizing her unique combination of technical knowledge and investigative skills. The federal trial that would ultimately determine Marcus's fate was still months away. But Elena had already achieved something important. She'd transformed a personal betrayal into a public service that would protect other researchers from similar crimes. Marcus had tried to steal her life's work and destroy her professional reputation, but instead, he'd unleashed a force that would dismantle his criminal enterprise and expose the broader threats facing American scientific research. Elena had learned that sometimes the best revenge wasn't just justice for yourself, but protection for everyone else who might become victims of similar crimes. As Elena prepared for the trial phase of the federal case, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a routine patent notification to becoming a key witness in a major national security investigation. The experience had taught her that betrayal, like severe weather, could strike without warning and cause devastating damage. But it had also shown her that with proper preparation, methodical analysis, and strategic response, even the most destructive storms could be weathered, and their aftermath used to build something stronger than what had existed before. Elena's story was far from over, but she'd already achieved the most important victory. She'd refused to be a passive victim and had instead become an active agent in her own defense and the protection of others. Marcus had underestimated the woman he'd married, assuming that her trust and love made her vulnerable to deception and exploitation. Instead, her scientific training, moral integrity, and determination to seek justice had made her the most dangerous enemy he could have created. The hunter had become the hunted, and the storm Elena unleashed would ensure that Marcus and his co-conspirators faced the full consequences of their crimes. Agent Kumar's investigation expanded rapidly once Elena provided access to her comprehensive evidence files. The FBI task force had grown to include specialists from the Commerce Department's Export Administration, the National Security Agency's Technology Transfer Division, and Homeland Security's Intellectual Property Enforcement Unit. Elena found herself at the center of what federal authorities described as one of the most significant cases of scientific espionage in recent years. But she knew the investigation was just beginning to uncover the true scope of Marcus's criminal network.
The breakthrough came when forensic accountants tracing Marcus's financial transactions discovered connections to Dr. Amanda Chen, a former atmospheric physicist who had left NOAA under controversial circumstances 18 months earlier. Amanda had been investigating irregularities in federal weather research contracts when she'd been abruptly reassigned and eventually forced to resign after raising concerns about unauthorized technology transfers. Elena realized that Amanda might represent the missing piece needed to understand how Marcus's operation had infiltrated federal agencies and compromised national weather security systems. Elena's first meeting with Amanda took place at a coffee shop in Lakewood, Colorado, far from the federal offices and research facilities where both women had built their careers. Amanda was younger than Elena had expected, perhaps 35, with the intense focus of someone who had seen her professional life destroyed by forces she couldn't control. Her resignation from NOAA had been portrayed as voluntary, but Amanda's expression suggested someone who had been systematically pushed out for asking inconvenient questions about activities that threatened national security. Amanda's story revealed the institutional dimension of Marcus's crimes that Elena hadn't fully understood. Marcus hadn't just been stealing individual patents and selling them to foreign buyers. He'd been systematically compromising federal weather research programs, identifying vulnerable technologies, and facilitating their transfer to hostile governments through networks of corrupted officials, compromised contractors, and fraudulent shell corporations. Amanda's investigation at NOAA had uncovered evidence of systematic data breaches, unauthorized technology transfers, and manipulation of federal contracting processes that went far beyond simple intellectual property theft. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Amanda explained that Marcus's operation had been targeting American meteorological capabilities for at least 5 years, identifying critical technologies that could provide strategic advantages to foreign weather services and military organizations. Atmospheric prediction algorithms, satellite data processing systems, severe weather detection protocols, and climate modeling techniques had all been systematically cataloged, stolen, and transferred to buyers in China, Russia, and North Korea.
The stolen technologies represented decades of American research investment and provided foreign governments with capabilities that could be used for both civilian and military purposes. Amanda's forced resignation from NOAA had been orchestrated to prevent her from exposing the full extent of the technology transfers and identifying the network of people facilitating them. Her supervisors had been pressured by higher-level officials to discredit her investigation and remove her from positions where she could continue gathering evidence. Amanda had been systematically isolated, denied access to critical information, and ultimately forced to choose between resignation and formal disciplinary actions that would have destroyed her security clearances and prevented her from working in atmospheric science anywhere in the government. Elena realized that Amanda represented exactly the kind of ally she needed to build a comprehensive case against Marcus's network. Amanda's insider knowledge of federal weather research programs, combined with her investigative experience and understanding of how the technology transfer process had been corrupted, would be crucial for helping prosecutors understand the national security implications of Marcus's crimes. Amanda also had contacts throughout the atmospheric science community who could provide additional evidence and testimony about the scope of the intellectual property theft. The alliance between Elena and Amanda created a powerful combination of technical expertise, investigative experience, and evidence documentation that federal prosecutors had rarely encountered in intellectual property cases. Elena's systematic analysis of Marcus's criminal activities provided the financial and legal framework for understanding how the theft operation functioned, while Amanda's knowledge of federal weather programs revealed the strategic significance of the stolen technologies and the methods used to compromise government research systems. Their collaboration also revealed additional victims of Marcus's criminal enterprise. Amanda had maintained contact with other researchers who had experienced suspicious approaches, unauthorized access to their work, or unusual pressure from supervisors to share sensitive information with outside contractors. Elena and Amanda began systematically contacting these individuals, documenting a pattern of intellectual property theft and institutional corruption that extended throughout the federal weather research community. Dr. Robert Kim, a hurricane prediction specialist at the National Hurricane Center, reported that his advanced storm tracking algorithms had been accessed without authorization and subsequently appeared in commercial weather services operated by foreign companies. Dr. Sarah Martinez from the Storm Prediction Center discovered that her tornado forecasting innovations had been incorporated into international weather systems without licensing agreements or attribution. Dr. Michael Thompson at the Climate Prediction Center found evidence that his drought prediction models were being used by agricultural organizations in countries that were supposedly restricted from accessing American climate research. The pattern was clear and systematic. Marcus's criminal network had been identifying valuable weather research across multiple federal agencies, stealing the intellectual property through various methods, and transferring the technologies to foreign buyers who could exploit them for commercial or strategic advantages. The operation represented a comprehensive assault on American meteorological capabilities that had been operating for years without detection by security officials who were focused on more traditional forms of espionage. Elena's investigation also uncovered the domestic infrastructure that supported Marcus's international technology transfers. The operation relied on a network of corrupted federal employees, compromised contractors, and fraudulent consulting firms that facilitated unauthorized access to classified research and created legitimate-appearing channels for transferring stolen technologies to foreign buyers. The sophistication of the operation suggested professional intelligence service involvement rather than simple commercial espionage. Agent Kumar confirmed Elena's suspicions during a secured briefing at the FBI's Denver field office. Intelligence agencies had been tracking increased foreign interest in American weather research for several years, but had been unable to identify the specific methods being used to access and transfer sensitive technologies. Elena's evidence provided the missing pieces needed to understand how the technology transfer network functioned and identify the key individuals responsible for compromising national security systems. The federal investigation expanded to include counterintelligence specialists from multiple agencies who recognized that Marcus's case represented a significant national security threat that required a comprehensive response. Elena found herself working with investigators from the FBI, CIA, NSA, and Defense Intelligence Agency, all of whom were concerned about the strategic implications of systematic weather technology theft. Elena's investigation also uncovered the domestic infrastructure that supported Marcus's international technology transfers. The operation relied on a network of corrupted federal employees, compromised contractors, and fraudulent consulting firms that facilitated unauthorized access to classified research and created legitimate-appearing channels for transferring stolen technologies to foreign buyers. The sophistication of the operation suggested professional intelligence service involvement rather than simple commercial espionage. Agent Kumar confirmed Elena's suspicions during a secured briefing at the FBI's Denver field office. Intelligence agencies had been tracking increased foreign interest in American weather research for several years, but had been unable to identify the specific methods being used to access and transfer sensitive technologies. Elena's evidence provided the missing pieces needed to understand how the technology transfer network functioned and identify the key individuals responsible for compromising national security systems. The federal investigation expanded to include counterintelligence specialists from multiple agencies who recognized that Marcus's case represented a significant national security threat that required comprehensive response. Elena found herself working with investigators from the FBI, CIA, NSA, and Defense Intelligence Agency, all of whom were concerned about the strategic implications of systematic weather technology theft.
The case had evolved from simple intellectual property fraud to a major counterintelligence operation targeting foreign espionage networks operating within American research institutions. Elena's role in the expanded investigation required additional security clearances and specialized training in counterintelligence procedures, patience and movements that reminded her constantly of the serious nature of the threats she was helping to expose. Elena's scientific background made her uniquely qualified to understand the technical aspects of the stolen technologies and explain their significance to investigators who lacked specialized atmospheric science knowledge. The investigation also revealed personal threats that Elena hadn't anticipated. Foreign intelligence services were aware that their technology acquisition networks had been compromised and were actively seeking to identify the sources of information that had exposed their operations. Elena's cooperation with federal investigators made her a potential target for intimidation, surveillance, or worse. Agent Kumar arranged for comprehensive security measures that included electronic surveillance detection, personal protection services, and secure communication systems that allowed Elena to continue her normal activities while minimizing exposure to foreign intelligence threats. Amanda faced similar security concerns, but her situation was complicated by the professional retaliation she had already experienced for investigating unauthorized technology transfers. Her forced resignation from NOAA had been intended to discredit her credibility and prevent her from accessing the information needed to expose the full scope of the conspiracy. Amanda's cooperation with the current investigation represented both vindication of her earlier concerns and increased risk from people who had already demonstrated willingness to destroy careers to protect their criminal activities. Elena and Amanda's partnership deepened as they recognized their shared commitment to exposing the truth about systematic weather technology theft and protecting American research capabilities from foreign exploitation. Both women had sacrificed significant personal and professional costs to pursue justice, and both understood that their ultimate success would depend on comprehensive documentation of crimes that powerful people were working to conceal. Their collaboration became a model for how victims of sophisticated criminal enterprises could work effectively with federal authorities to expose complex national security threats. The investigation's expansion also created opportunities for Elena to recover damages that went far beyond the immediate financial impact of Marcus's patent theft. Federal authorities were pursuing asset forfeiture actions against the entire network of shell corporations, fraudulent consulting firms, and overseas accounts that had been used to launder stolen intellectual property and hide criminal proceeds. Elena's family patents represented just a small fraction of the total assets that could be recovered through comprehensive prosecution of the criminal enterprise. Elena's cooperation with federal investigators also revealed the broader pattern of institutional vulnerabilities that had made Marcus's crimes possible. Federal weather research programs had been operating under security protocols designed for traditional classified information rather than intellectual property that was vulnerable to theft through sophisticated financial and legal manipulations. Marcus's success had depended on exploiting gaps between different security systems and taking advantage of institutional boundaries that prevented comprehensive oversight of research protection activities. Elena's recommendations for improving research security were incorporated into policy reforms being developed by multiple federal agencies.
Her unique perspective as both a victim of technology theft and a technical expert in atmospheric science provided insights that were unavailable from traditional security specialists who lacked deep understanding of scientific research processes. Elena's contributions to policy development gave her a sense of purpose that extended beyond seeking justice for Marcus's crimes to include protection of future research from similar threats. The federal investigation also uncovered evidence of Marcus's personal vulnerabilities that Elena could potentially exploit to pressure him into cooperation with prosecutors. Marcus's criminal network had been built on relationships with people who were primarily motivated by financial gain rather than ideological commitment to foreign governments. Several key participants were already showing signs of willingness to cooperate with federal authorities in exchange for reduced sentences or immunity from prosecution. Marcus's situation was further complicated by the international dimensions of his crimes, which exposed him to prosecution by foreign governments who were concerned about their own citizens' involvement in espionage activities that could compromise their diplomatic relationships with the United States. The complexity of Marcus's legal situation created opportunities for Elena and federal prosecutors to apply pressure that might force him to provide information about criminal activities that extended beyond his direct involvement. Elena's strategic thinking, enhanced by months of working with federal investigators and counterintelligence specialists, had evolved to encompass sophisticated analysis of criminal psychology and institutional dynamics. She was no longer simply a victim seeking justice for personal wrongs, but had become a key participant in a major national security investigation with implications that extended far beyond her individual case. Elena's transformation from atmospheric physicist to counterintelligence consultant represented a fundamental evolution in her professional identity and capabilities. The approaching confrontation with Marcus would represent the culmination of months of careful planning and evidence gathering, but Elena understood that the ultimate resolution of her case would depend on factors that extended far beyond her personal desire for justice. The federal investigation had revealed systematic threats to American research capabilities that required comprehensive institutional responses and long-term security reforms. Elena's role in exposing these threats had given her a unique perspective on the intersection between scientific research and national security that would shape her future career and professional identity. Elena's alliance with Amanda had also created opportunities for both women to rebuild their careers in ways that incorporated their unique experiences with technology theft and institutional corruption. Amanda's forced resignation from NOAA had initially seemed like a devastating professional setback, but her cooperation with the federal investigation was establishing her as a leading expert on research security issues. Elena's patent theft case had similarly threatened to destroy her scientific reputation, but her effective response to Marcus's crimes was creating new opportunities for professional advancement and leadership roles in research protection. The investigation's expansion had created a network of professional relationships and security clearances that would provide Elena and Amanda with unique career opportunities in both government and private sector organizations concerned about intellectual property protection and research security. Their experience with sophisticated criminal enterprises and federal investigations made them valuable consultants for organizations seeking to improve their own security measures and protect valuable intellectual property from theft or compromise. Elena's case had also attracted attention from international partners who were concerned about their own vulnerabilities to systematic technology theft and foreign espionage activities. Several allied governments had requested briefings on the methods Marcus's network had used to compromise American research systems, and Elena's expertise was being sought for consultation on improving international cooperation in research security activities. The personal cost of Elena's expanded role in national security investigations was significant, but the professional opportunities created by her unique expertise and experience provided compensation that extended beyond financial considerations. Elena had discovered capabilities and interests that she hadn't known she possessed, and her work with federal investigators opened career paths that combined her scientific background with law enforcement and intelligence activities in ways that were both challenging and fulfilling.
Elena's relationship with Amanda had evolved from professional collaboration to genuine friendship, based on shared experiences with institutional betrayal and commitment to protecting research integrity. Both women had sacrificed comfortable careers and personal relationships to pursue justice for systematic crimes that threatened national security, and both had discovered personal strength and professional capabilities that they hadn't previously recognized. Their partnership represented a model for how victims of sophisticated criminal enterprises could work together to expose complex threats and protect others from similar exploitation. The federal investigation was approaching a critical phase where months of evidence gathering and network analysis would culminate in coordinated arrests and prosecutions designed to dismantle Marcus's entire criminal enterprise. Elena's role in that phase would require careful coordination with prosecutors, intelligence agencies, and international partners to ensure that the complex legal and security considerations were properly managed. The success of the prosecution would depend not just on the evidence Elena and Amanda had gathered, but on their continued cooperation with federal authorities throughout what was likely to be years of legal proceedings. Elena's preparation for the final phase of the investigation included comprehensive security measures designed to protect her from potential retaliation by criminal network members who were facing serious federal charges. The possibility of intimidation or violence was real, and Elena's cooperation with federal authorities had made her a high-value target for people who had already demonstrated willingness to corrupt institutions and destroy careers to protect their criminal activities. Elena's security arrangements reflected the serious nature of the threats she faced and the importance of her testimony to the success of the federal prosecution. Amanda's security situation was similarly complex, but her experience with institutional retaliation had prepared her for the challenges of cooperating with federal investigations while maintaining personal safety and professional credibility. Amanda's earlier investigation of unauthorized technology transfers had exposed her to professional risks that prepared her for the more serious personal security threats created by her cooperation with counterintelligence activities. Her resilience and investigative skills made her an invaluable partner for Elena throughout the complex process of exposing systematic criminal activities. The alliance between Elena and Amanda had created a partnership that combined their individual strengths and expertise to create capabilities that neither woman could have achieved alone. Elena's technical knowledge and systematic approach to evidence analysis complemented Amanda's institutional experience and understanding of federal research security systems. Together, they had built a comprehensive case that exposed not just Marcus's individual crimes, but the broader network of institutional vulnerabilities and criminal activities that threatened American research capabilities and national security interests. Elena's transformation from victim to federal witness to counterintelligence consultant represented a fundamental evolution in her understanding of how scientific research intersected with national security concerns and international espionage activities. The experience had been traumatic and challenging, but had also revealed personal capabilities and professional opportunities that would shape her future career and identity. Elena had learned that sometimes the most devastating personal betrayals could become catalysts for discovering strength and purpose that extended far beyond individual justice to include protection of broader community interests and national security concerns. The investigation had revealed that Marcus's crimes were part of a systematic assault on American scientific capabilities that required comprehensive response from multiple government agencies and international partners. Elena's role in exposing these crimes has made her a key participant in efforts to strengthen research security and protect intellectual property from foreign exploitation. The success of those efforts would depend on continued cooperation from victims like Elena and Amanda, who were willing to sacrifice personal comfort and security to protect national interests and scientific integrity. The personal cost of Elena's expanded role in national security investigations was significant, but the professional opportunities created by her unique expertise and experience provided compensation that extended beyond financial considerations. Elena had discovered capabilities and interests that she hadn't known she possessed, and her work with federal investigators had opened career paths that combined her scientific background with law enforcement and intelligence activities in ways that were both challenging and fulfilling. Elena's relationship with Amanda had evolved from professional collaboration to genuine friendship based on shared experiences with institutional betrayal and commitment to protecting research integrity. Both women had sacrificed comfortable careers and personal relationships to pursue justice for systematic crimes that threatened national security, and both had discovered personal strength and professional capabilities that they hadn't previously recognized. Their partnership represented a model for how victims of sophisticated criminal enterprises could work together to expose complex threats and protect others from similar exploitation. The federal investigation was approaching a critical phase where months of evidence gathering and network analysis would culminate in coordinated arrests and prosecutions designed to dismantle Marcus's entire criminal enterprise. Elena's role in that phase would require careful coordination with prosecutors, intelligence agencies, and international partners to ensure that the complex legal and security considerations were properly managed. The success of the prosecution would depend not just on the evidence Elena and Amanda had gathered, but on their continued cooperation with federal authorities throughout what was likely to be years of legal proceedings. Elena's preparation for the final phase of the investigation included comprehensive security measures designed to protect her from potential retaliation by criminal network members who were facing serious federal charges. The possibility of intimidation or violence was real, and Elena's cooperation with federal authorities had made her a high-value target for people who had already demonstrated willingness.
Elena's story was approaching its climactic confrontation, but the broader implications of her case would extend far beyond individual justice to include institutional reforms and security improvements that would protect future researchers from similar exploitation. Elena's courage in pursuing comprehensive exposure of Marcus's criminal network had created opportunities for systematic improvements in research security that would benefit the entire scientific community and strengthen protection for intellectual property that was vital to American technological and economic competitiveness. The federal investigation had transformed Elena's personal quest for justice into a major national security operation with international implications and long-term policy consequences. Elena's unique combination of technical expertise, investigative capabilities, and cooperation with federal authorities had made her an indispensable participant in efforts to expose and dismantle sophisticated criminal enterprises that threatened both individual researchers and national security interests. Elena's evolution from victim to active participant in counterintelligence operations represented a personal triumph that had created broader benefits for research security and intellectual property protection that would extend far beyond her individual case. The confrontation Elena had been preparing for over 6 months finally came when Agent Kumar's task force decided Marcus had become too dangerous to remain free. Intelligence intercepts revealed that Marcus was planning to flee the country with encrypted data containing classified weather research from multiple federal agencies. The National Weather Service contract deadline had passed, and Marcus's desperate attempts to access Elena's secure research files had escalated to hiring foreign hackers who specialized in penetrating government systems. Federal authorities could no longer risk allowing Marcus to operate freely while they gathered additional evidence. Elena's role in Marcus's capture was carefully orchestrated to ensure maximum psychological impact while maintaining her safety. The FBI arranged for Marcus to believe that Elena had been located and was preparing to return home, creating the perfect opportunity for him to incriminate himself while federal agents documented his actions. Elena would finally confront her husband face to face, but this time she would be protected by comprehensive surveillance and surrounded by federal agents ready to intervene if Marcus became violent or attempted to flee. The setup took place at their former home in Denver, which had been under federal surveillance for weeks while investigators monitored Marcus's increasingly erratic behavior. Elena hadn't seen the house since her disappearance 6 months earlier, and returning felt like visiting a crime scene where her former life had been murdered. Every room contained memories of their shared past, but Elena's perspective had been permanently altered by her knowledge of Marcus's systematic deception and criminal activities. The home that had once represented love and partnership now felt like an elaborate stage set designed to facilitate Marcus's theft of her life's work. Elena positioned herself in Marcus's home office, surrounded by equipment that federal technicians had modified to record every word and image from their confrontation. The irony wasn't lost on her that Marcus would be captured in the same room where he had planned his theft of her intellectual property and coordinated his criminal enterprise.
Elena wore sophisticated recording equipment that would capture not just their conversation, but also any physical threats or violence that Marcus might attempt when he realized his crimes had been exposed. Agent Kumar and her team were positioned throughout the house and neighborhood, ready to intervene immediately if Marcus showed any signs of dangerous behavior. Elena's safety was the highest priority, but federal authorities also recognized that Marcus's psychological response to discovering Elena's knowledge of his crimes would provide crucial evidence about his state of mind and criminal intent. The confrontation represented both personal resolution for Elena and the culmination of a complex federal investigation that had international implications. Marcus arrived at the house at 9:15 p.m., using his key to enter through the front door as Elena had requested in her carefully crafted message suggesting she was ready to discuss their future together. Elena heard his footsteps on the hardwood floors, the same sound that had once brought comfort and now triggered memories of betrayal and deception. Marcus called her name as he moved through the house, his voice carrying relief and anxiety in equal measure. Elena waited in the office, knowing that Marcus would eventually find her surrounded by evidence of his criminal activities. When Marcus appeared in the doorway, Elena saw immediately that 6 months of stress and fear had taken a devastating toll on his appearance and mental state. He had lost significant weight, his eyes were hollow with exhaustion, and his hands trembled slightly as he gripped the doorframe. Marcus looked like a man who had been living in constant fear of discovery while desperately trying to maintain the facade of normal life. Elena felt no sympathy for his obvious suffering, knowing that his anxiety was caused by guilt over crimes that had destroyed her trust and threatened national security. Elena's first words were carefully chosen to maximize psychological impact while encouraging Marcus to incriminate himself on the recording equipment that federal agents were monitoring. She simply said his name and asked where he had been, as if she were unaware of his criminal activities and genuinely curious about his recent behavior. Marcus's response revealed both relief at seeing Elena and desperate calculation about how to manage a situation that threatened to expose his crimes and destroy his carefully constructed plans. Marcus approached Elena cautiously, clearly uncertain about her mental state and intentions after 6 months of unexplained absence. He began with expressions of love and concern, asking where Elena had been and why she had disappeared without explanation. His performance was skilled but not quite convincing, revealing the practiced deception that Elena now recognized as Marcus's fundamental character trait. Elena allowed Marcus to continue his emotional manipulation while internally marveling at his ability to maintain lies even when facing the person he had most systematically betrayed. Elena's response was measured and strategic, designed to encourage Marcus to reveal information about his criminal activities without direct accusations that might cause him to become defensive or violent. She mentioned feeling confused and overwhelmed by recent events, suggesting that she needed Marcus's help understanding some business matters that had come to her attention during her absence. Elena's apparent vulnerability and dependence on Marcus's expertise triggered his instinct to control and manipulate, causing him to lower his guard and begin explaining activities that revealed his criminal intent. The conversation that followed provided federal investigators with exactly the kind of evidence they needed to establish Marcus's criminal intent and demonstrate his consciousness of guilt. Marcus gradually revealed details about his patent theft, his creation of shell corporations, his relationships with foreign buyers, and his systematic embezzlement of federal research funds. Elena's skillful questioning encouraged Marcus to provide specific information about dates, amounts, and co-conspirators that corroborated evidence federal agents had gathered through months of investigation.
Marcus's admissions were particularly damaging because they revealed his understanding that his activities were illegal and his awareness that Elena would be harmed by his theft of her intellectual property. Marcus explicitly acknowledged stealing Elena's patents, lying about the ownership of their shared research, and using Elena's professional reputation to facilitate fraudulent contracts with federal agencies. His casual discussion of these criminal activities demonstrated a level of premeditation and systematic planning that would make federal prosecution straightforward and severe penalties inevitable.
The most chilling moment came when Marcus discussed his long-term plans for their relationship and Elena's role in his continued criminal activities. Marcus had never intended to maintain their marriage once he had completed his theft of Elena's intellectual property and secured his international business relationships. He had been planning to divorce Elena after destroying her professional credibility through false accusations of research misconduct and mental instability. Marcus's plan would have left Elena financially ruined, professionally destroyed, and unable to challenge his theft of her life's work. Elena's response to these revelations was controlled and strategic, despite the emotional devastation of learning that Marcus had been planning to destroy her reputation and professional future as part of his criminal enterprise. Elena continued to ask questions that encouraged Marcus to provide additional incriminating information while federal agents documented every admission of criminal activity. Elena's scientific training had taught her to maintain analytical objectivity even under extreme stress, and she applied those skills to extracting maximum evidence from Marcus's psychological need to justify his betrayal. Marcus's confidence grew as he interpreted Elena's questions as signs of confusion and dependence rather than strategic investigation. He began providing detailed explanations of his criminal methods, apparently believing that Elena's love and trust would prevent her from taking action against him even after learning about his crimes. Marcus's narcissistic assumption that Elena would ultimately forgive and enable his criminal activities revealed a level of psychological manipulation and emotional abuse that added additional dimensions to his systematic betrayal. The confrontation reached its climax when Elena directly confronted Marcus about his theft of her patents and his systematic embezzlement of federal research funds. Marcus's initial response was defensive denial, but Elena's detailed knowledge of his criminal activities quickly overwhelmed his ability to maintain his deceptions. Marcus realized that Elena had not just discovered his crimes, but had been systematically investigating them and gathering evidence that could destroy his carefully constructed criminal enterprise. Marcus's psychological transformation when he realized the extent of Elena's knowledge was dramatic and frightening. The loving husband persona disappeared immediately, replaced by cold calculation and barely contained violence. Marcus began making explicit threats against Elena's safety, promising that she would never be able to testify against him or expose his criminal activities to law enforcement. His threats revealed both his consciousness of guilt and his willingness to use violence to protect his criminal enterprise. Federal agents intervened immediately when Marcus's threats escalated to physical intimidation. Agent Kumar and her team entered the office with weapons drawn, surrounding Marcus before he could act on his violent impulses. Marcus's shock at discovering federal surveillance was complete and devastating, revealing that he had walked directly into a carefully orchestrated trap that had documented his criminal activities and violent tendencies in ways that would ensure severe federal prosecution. Marcus's arrest was swift and comprehensive. Federal agents had prepared arrest warrants for multiple criminal charges, including patent fraud, embezzlement, espionage, money laundering, and threats of violence against federal witnesses. The charges carried potential sentences of life imprisonment, ensuring that Marcus would never again be free to steal intellectual property or threaten researchers who had discovered his criminal activities. Elena watched Marcus being handcuffed and read his rights with a mixture of satisfaction and relief that her long ordeal was finally approaching resolution. The federal raids that followed Marcus's arrest were coordinated across multiple states and international jurisdictions, targeting every component of his criminal network. Simultaneous arrests of co-conspirators, seizures of criminal assets, and recovery of stolen intellectual property demonstrated the comprehensive scope of the federal investigation that Elena's evidence had made possible. The operation represented one of the largest intellectual property theft cases in federal law enforcement history, with implications that extended far beyond Elena's individual situation. Dr. Amanda Chen played a crucial role in coordinating the federal response to Marcus's network, using her institutional knowledge of compromised federal programs to guide investigators toward additional evidence and criminal participants. Amanda's cooperation with the investigation had been vindicated by the comprehensive exposure of the technology theft operation that had destroyed her NOH career and threatened national security interests. Amanda's expertise and Elena's systematic evidence gathering had combined to create an unprecedented case that would reshape federal research security policies. The international dimensions of Marcus's crimes created diplomatic complications that required careful coordination between American law enforcement and foreign governments whose citizens had participated in the technology theft operation. Several countries requested extradition of their nationals who had been involved in Marcus's criminal enterprise, while others offered cooperation in recovering stolen American research that had been transferred to their institutions. The case became a model for international cooperation in intellectual property enforcement and research activities. Elena's testimony before federal grand juries and congressional committees provided authoritative analysis of how systematic technology theft threatened American research capabilities and national security interests. Elena's unique combination of technical expertise and personal experience with sophisticated criminal enterprises made her an invaluable witness for explaining the significance of intellectual property crimes to officials who were responsible for developing policy responses. Elena's recommendations influenced federal legislation designed to strengthen research security and improve protection for government-funded intellectual property. The federal trial that determined Marcus's fate was a comprehensive examination of systematic intellectual property theft that attracted international attention from researchers, law enforcement officials, and policymakers concerned about similar threats to their own institutions. Elena's testimony was the centerpiece of the prosecution case, providing detailed analysis of Marcus's criminal methods and their impact on both individual researchers and national research capabilities. Elena's scientific credibility and thorough documentation of Marcus's crimes made his defense virtually impossible.
Marcus's defense attorneys attempted to portray him as a victim of foreign manipulation who had been coerced into participating in technology theft activities against his will. The strategy failed completely when prosecutors presented evidence of Marcus's systematic planning, financial motivation, and violent threats against witnesses who had exposed his crimes. Marcus's own recorded admissions during his confrontation with Elena provided irrefutable proof of his criminal intent and consciousness of guilt that destroyed any possibility of claiming innocence or coercion. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Marcus's conviction on espionage charges carried a mandatory life sentence without possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again threaten researchers or steal intellectual property for foreign governments. Elena watched the verdict with profound satisfaction, knowing that Marcus's criminal enterprise had been completely destroyed and that other researchers would be protected from similar exploitation. Marcus's sentencing hearing provided Elena with the opportunity to deliver a victim impact statement that summarized the personal and professional damage caused by his systematic betrayal. Elena described the psychological trauma of discovering that her marriage had been based on criminal deception, the financial costs of protecting herself from Marcus's criminal network, and the ongoing security concerns created by his relationships with foreign intelligence services. Elena's statement also emphasized the broader implications of intellectual property theft for American research capabilities and national security interests. Judge Morrison's sentencing remarks acknowledged the unprecedented scope of Marcus's crimes and their significance for research security and international competitiveness. Marcus received life imprisonment without parole, plus additional consecutive sentences for financial crimes, ensuring that he would never be released regardless of any future changes in federal sentencing policies. Judge Morrison specifically noted that Marcus's crimes represented a systematic assault on American scientific capabilities that warranted the most severe penalties available under federal law. Elena's victory extended far beyond Marcus's conviction to include comprehensive recovery of stolen assets and intellectual property that had been seized from his criminal network. Federal asset forfeiture proceedings recovered over $15 million in criminal proceeds, including the original payment Marcus had received for Elena's patents, plus accumulated investment returns and additional funds from other victims of his technology theft operation. Elena's financial recovery exceeded the immediate damages from Marcus's crimes and provided resources for rebuilding her professional life and supporting other researchers who had been victimized by similar criminal enterprises. The professional vindication Elena received through the federal investigation and successful prosecution was equally important for her long-term career prospects and personal healing.
Elena's role in exposing systematic technology theft had established her as a leading expert on research security issues and intellectual property protection. Federal agencies, international organizations, and private companies sought Elena's consultation on improving their security measures and protecting valuable research from criminal exploitation. Elena's new career as a research security consultant combined her atmospheric science expertise with investigative skills and law enforcement experience gained through her cooperation with the federal investigation. Elena's unique qualifications made her invaluable for organizations seeking to understand and defend against sophisticated intellectual property theft operations. Elena's professional success demonstrated that victims of systematic criminal enterprises could transform their experiences into valuable expertise that protected others from similar exploitation. Dr. Amanda Chen's career had been similarly transformed by her cooperation with the federal investigation and her role in exposing institutional vulnerabilities that had facilitated systematic technology theft. Amanda received offers from multiple federal agencies seeking her expertise in research security and counterintelligence activities. Amanda's experience with institutional retaliation and criminal investigation made her uniquely qualified to help other researchers navigate similar challenges while protecting their careers and personal safety. Elena and Amanda's partnership evolved into a formal consulting firm that specialized in research security, intellectual property protection, and institutional reform for organizations concerned about technology theft and foreign espionage activities. Their combined expertise in atmospheric science, federal research programs, and criminal investigation created unique capabilities that were highly valued by clients seeking comprehensive protection for sensitive research and valuable intellectual property. The broader impact of Elena's case extended to significant reforms in federal research security policies and international cooperation in intellectual property enforcement. Elena's recommendations influenced new legislation requiring enhanced security measures for government-funded research, stronger penalties for intellectual property theft, and improved coordination between law enforcement agencies and research institutions. Elena's case became a model for how victims of sophisticated criminal enterprises could work effectively with federal authorities to expose complex threats and protect national interests. Elena's personal healing from Marcus's betrayal was facilitated by her professional success and her role in protecting other researchers from similar exploitation. Elena found that transforming her victimization into expertise that benefited others provided both personal satisfaction and psychological resolution that would not have been possible through purely individual recovery efforts. Elena's ability to use her painful experience to create positive change for the broader research community gave meaning and purpose to her suffering that enabled complete psychological healing. Elena's new personal relationships were built on foundations of complete honesty and mutual respect that reflected her hard-earned understanding of deception and manipulation. Elena's experience with Marcus's systematic betrayal had taught her to recognize early warning signs of exploitative behavior and to maintain independence even within intimate partnerships. Elena's emotional intelligence and analytical skills helped her build healthy relationships that supported rather than threatened her professional success and personal well-being. 3 years after Marcus's conviction, Elena received notification that several foreign governments were requesting her assistance in investigating similar technology theft operations that threatened their own research capabilities. Elena's expertise in analyzing complex criminal enterprises and her experience with international cooperation in intellectual property enforcement made her uniquely qualified to address systematic threats that extended beyond American research institutions to affect global scientific collaboration and innovation. Elena's international consulting work revealed that Marcus's criminal network had been part of a broader pattern of systematic technology theft that threatened research institutions worldwide. Elena's case had exposed methods and organizational structures that were being replicated by criminal enterprises in multiple countries, creating ongoing threats to scientific progress and international cooperation in research activities. Elena's expertise was crucial for developing coordinated international responses to these systematic threats. Elena's transformation from victim to internationally recognized expert in research security represented a complete reversal of Marcus's attempt to destroy her professional reputation and credibility. Marcus had intended to steal Elena's life work and eliminate her as a threat to his criminal activities. Dr. Amanda Chen's career had been similarly transformed by her cooperation with the federal investigation and her role in exposing institutional vulnerabilities that had facilitated systematic technology theft. Amanda received offers from multiple federal agencies seeking her expertise in research security and counterintelligence activities. Amanda's experience with institutional retaliation and criminal investigation made her uniquely qualified to help other researchers navigate similar challenges while protecting their careers and personal safety. Elena and Amanda's partnership evolved into a formal consulting firm that specialized in research security, intellectual property protection, and institutional reform for organizations concerned about technology theft and foreign espionage activities. Their combined expertise in atmospheric science, federal research programs, and criminal investigation created unique capabilities that were highly valued by clients seeking comprehensive protection for sensitive research and valuable intellectual property. The broader impact of Elena's case extended to significant reforms in federal research security policies and international cooperation in intellectual property enforcement. Elena's recommendations influenced new legislation requiring enhanced security measures for government-funded research, stronger penalties for intellectual property theft, and improved coordination between law enforcement agencies and research institutions. Elena's case became a model for how victims of sophisticated criminal enterprises could work effectively with federal authorities to expose complex threats and protect national interests. Elena's personal healing from Marcus's betrayal was facilitated by her professional success and her role in protecting other researchers from similar exploitation. Elena found that transforming her victimization into expertise that benefited others provided both personal satisfaction and psychological resolution that would not have been possible through purely individual recovery efforts. Elena's ability to use her painful experience to create positive change for the broader research community gave meaning and purpose to her suffering that enabled complete psychological healing. Elena's new personal relationships were built on foundations of complete honesty and mutual respect that reflected her hard-earned understanding of deception and manipulation. Elena's experience with Marcus's systematic betrayal had taught her to recognize early warning signs of exploitative behavior and to maintain independence even within intimate partnerships. Elena's emotional intelligence and analytical skills helped her build healthy relationships that supported rather than threatened her professional success and personal well-being. 3 years after Marcus's conviction, Elena received.
Instead, his crimes had created opportunities for Elena to develop new expertise and professional relationships that made her more influential and successful than she had been before discovering his betrayal. Elena's story had become required reading in law enforcement training programs and academic courses focused on intellectual property protection and research security. Elena's systematic approach to investigating complex criminal enterprises and her effective cooperation with federal authorities provided models for how other victims could respond to similar threats while protecting themselves and assisting law enforcement in prosecuting sophisticated criminals. The Elena Rodriguez Research Security Foundation, established with proceeds recovered from Marcus's criminal enterprise, provided grants and educational resources for researchers concerned about intellectual property protection and institutional security. The foundation's work extended Elena's impact beyond her individual consulting activities to create systematic improvements in research security that would protect future generations of scientists from criminal exploitation. Elena's annual lecture series on research security and intellectual property protection attracted audiences of researchers, law enforcement officials, and policymakers from around the world. Elena's presentations combined technical expertise with personal experience to create uniquely authoritative analysis of threats facing contemporary research institutions and scientific collaboration. Elena's educational activities ensured that her hard-earned expertise would be shared widely throughout the scientific community and incorporated into institutional policies and individual practices that strengthened research security. Elena's marriage to Dr. James Park, a cybersecurity researcher who specialized in protecting scientific data systems, represented both personal happiness and professional partnership that supported Elena's continued work in research security. James's technical expertise complemented Elena's investigative experience and institutional knowledge, creating a powerful partnership that enhanced both their individual careers and their shared commitment to protecting scientific research from criminal exploitation.
Elena and James's collaboration on developing improved security protocols for atmospheric research data represented the culmination of Elena's professional evolution from atmospheric physicist to research security expert. Their joint work combined atmospheric science expertise with cutting-edge cybersecurity techniques to create protection systems that were specifically designed to defend weather research from the kinds of sophisticated theft operations that Marcus had used to steal Elena's intellectual property. Elena's current role as Director of Research Security for the National Center for Atmospheric Research provided institutional influence that enabled systematic improvements in protection for government-funded weather research. Elena's policies and procedures were being adopted by research institutions throughout the federal government and internationally, creating comprehensive protection for scientific work that had previously been vulnerable to systematic theft and exploitation. Elena's personal satisfaction came not just from her professional success and financial recovery, but from her knowledge that Marcus's attempt to destroy her had instead created opportunities for Elena to protect countless other researchers from similar exploitation. Elena had transformed systematic victimization into systematic protection that would benefit scientific research for generations. Marcus's crimes had inadvertently created exactly the kind of positive change that Elena's scientific work had always been intended to achieve. Elena's story demonstrated that even the most devastating personal betrayals could become catalysts for positive change that extended far beyond individual justice to include broader social benefits and institutional improvements. Elena's courage in pursuing comprehensive exposure of Marcus's criminal network had created unprecedented cooperation between law enforcement and research communities that strengthened protection for intellectual property and enhanced national security. Elena's transformation from victim to protector represented both personal triumph and professional service that exemplified the best aspects of scientific ethics and social responsibility. Elena's legacy would extend far beyond her individual case to include systematic improvements in research security, international cooperation in intellectual property protection, and institutional reforms that would protect scientific research for decades to come. Elena had learned that the most complete victory over criminal betrayal wasn't just personal justice or financial recovery, but the creation of systematic protections that prevented others from experiencing similar victimization. Elena's life work had evolved from predicting weather patterns to predicting and preventing criminal threats to scientific research, demonstrating that personal transformation could create professional purposes that served both individual fulfillment and broader social benefits. Marcus had underestimated the woman he had married, assuming that her scientific focus and trusting nature made her vulnerable to systematic deception and exploitation. Instead, Elena's analytical skills and ethical commitment had made her the most dangerous enemy Marcus could have created. His systematic exposure of his criminal enterprise had not only destroyed Marcus's carefully constructed plans, but had also created lasting protections for scientific research that would prevent similar crimes for generations. Elena's story proved that sometimes the most devastating betrayals could become the foundation for the most meaningful victories, transforming individual trauma into systematic protection that served broader social interests and demonstrated the ultimate power of truth over deception. Intellectual property theft within marriage represents one of the most devastating forms of betrayal, combining personal violation with professional destruction in ways that can permanently alter victims' lives and careers. The case of meteorological patent theft highlights particularly complex dynamics where scientific innovation, family legacy, and national security interests intersect with intimate relationship fraud and sophisticated criminal enterprises. Patent theft in the atmospheric science field carries implications that extend far beyond individual financial losses to encompass national weather forecasting capabilities, disaster preparedness systems, and climate research infrastructure. When family-developed meteorological technologies spanning multiple generations are stolen and sold to foreign entities, the damage affects not just the immediate victims, but entire communities that depend on accurate weather prediction for safety and economic planning. The theft of atmospheric pressure prediction algorithms, storm tracking systems, and severe weather detection protocols can compromise emergency response capabilities and put civilian populations at risk during natural disasters. The sophistication required to steal and monetize meteorological patents reveals the systematic nature of intellectual property crimes targeting American scientific research. Criminal enterprises specializing in technology theft often focus on government-funded research that has clear commercial applications and strategic value for foreign competitors. Atmospheric science innovations funded by federal agencies like NOAA, the National Science Foundation, and the Department of Energy represent particularly attractive targets because they combine immediate commercial value with long-term strategic significance for both civilian and military weather forecasting capabilities. Marriage-based intellectual property theft presents unique challenges for victims and law enforcement because the perpetrators have intimate access to research materials, financial accounts, and personal information that facilitates sophisticated crimes while maintaining emotional manipulation that delays discovery and response. Spouses who steal patents often spend years documenting their victims' work, building shell corporations to hide criminal proceeds, and creating business relationships that enable the monetization of stolen technologies. The combination of emotional trust and professional collaboration creates ideal conditions for systematic intellectual property theft that can operate undetected for extended periods. The psychological impact of discovering spousal patent theft often exceeds the financial and professional damages because victims must simultaneously process personal betrayal and criminal victimization while protecting themselves from ongoing threats and building legal cases against people they previously trusted completely. The realization that intimate relationships were deliberately cultivated to facilitate intellectual property theft can cause lasting trauma that affects victims' ability to form future personal and professional relationships. Recovery often requires comprehensive psychological support, along with legal and financial remediation, to address the multiple dimensions of harm created by systematic spousal deception. Federal law enforcement approaches to intellectual property theft have evolved significantly in response to cases involving family-based crimes and foreign espionage activities.
The FBI's intellectual property crime units now recognize that domestic relationships can provide cover for sophisticated criminal enterprises that pose national security threats. Investigation of spousal patent theft often reveals broader networks of corrupted officials, compromised contractors, and international buyers that require coordinated response from multiple federal agencies, including counterintelligence specialists and export control enforcement divisions. The National Weather Service's modernization initiatives have created unprecedented opportunities for criminals seeking to monetize stolen atmospheric science technologies. Federal contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars are available for weather prediction systems, monitoring equipment, and data analysis platforms that incorporate cutting-edge meteorological research. Criminals who steal patents related to these technologies can potentially secure government contracts using taxpayer-funded innovations that were developed by legitimate researchers but claimed through fraudulent means. Shell corporation structures used to launder stolen intellectual property have become increasingly sophisticated, often involving multiple jurisdictions, offshore banking systems, and complex ownership arrangements designed to obscure the true sources of valuable technologies. Patent theft operations frequently create networks of seemingly legitimate companies that can bid on government contracts, license technologies to private organizations, and generate revenue streams that appear lawful while actually representing the monetization of stolen research and development investments. The intersection of intellectual property theft with foreign intelligence activities creates additional complications for victims and investigators. Atmospheric science technologies have both civilian and military applications, making them attractive targets for foreign governments seeking to enhance their own weather forecasting capabilities or compromise American meteorological systems. Patent theft that involves international buyers may constitute espionage activities that trigger national security investigations and diplomatic complications extending far beyond simple intellectual property disputes. Recovery of damages from intellectual property theft often requires years of complex litigation involving multiple jurisdictions and specialized forensic accounting to trace stolen assets through sophisticated laundering schemes. Victims may need to pursue both criminal and civil remedies while cooperating with federal investigators and protecting themselves from retaliation by criminal networks that have demonstrated willingness to corrupt institutions and threaten witnesses. The financial costs of comprehensive legal response can exceed the immediate damages from patent theft, creating additional hardships for victims who are already dealing with professional and personal disruption. Institutional vulnerabilities in federal research programs have enabled systematic intellectual property theft by providing inadequate security for valuable innovations and failing to implement comprehensive oversight of contractor access to sensitive technologies. Research institutions often focus on scientific collaboration and information sharing while neglecting security measures needed to protect intellectual property from sophisticated criminal enterprises. The result is systematic exposure of government-funded research to theft by domestic and foreign criminals who exploit institutional trust and collaboration to steal valuable technologies. Reform efforts in research security have focused on implementing stronger access controls, improving background investigation procedures, and enhancing coordination between research institutions and law enforcement agencies responsible for protecting intellectual property. New policies require comprehensive documentation of valuable research, regular security assessments of research programs, and immediate notification of law enforcement when unauthorized access or suspicious activities are detected. These measures are designed to prevent future cases of systematic intellectual property theft while protecting legitimate scientific collaboration and innovation activities. The transformation of intellectual property theft victims into advocates for research security demonstrates how personal trauma can become catalyst for systematic improvements that protect broader community interests. Victims who develop expertise in investigating complex criminal enterprises and cooperating with federal authorities often become valuable consultants for organizations seeking to improve their own security measures and protect valuable intellectual property from theft or compromise. This evolution from victimization to expertise represents both personal healing and professional service that creates lasting benefits extending far beyond individual justice. International cooperation in intellectual property enforcement has become increasingly important as criminal enterprises operate across national boundaries and utilize offshore financial systems to hide stolen assets. Successful prosecution of patent theft often requires coordination between American law enforcement and foreign governments whose citizens or institutions may be involved in criminal activities. The development of international protocols for research security and intellectual protection represents an ongoing effort to address systematic threats that affect scientific institutions worldwide. The long-term implications of meteorological patent theft extend beyond immediate financial and professional damages to include compromised weather forecasting capabilities that affect public safety, emergency preparedness, and economic planning activities that depend on accurate atmospheric predictions. When valuable weather technologies are stolen and transferred to foreign entities, American meteorological capabilities may be permanently compromised, while potential adversaries gain strategic advantages in weather prediction and climate research that could affect both civilian and military planning activities for decades. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.